Okay, happy Sunday from Australia. It's Saturday over in the US. We have Becky Clawson on, head judge, head pro league judge, and we are so excited. We've been kind of going back and forth for the last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, getting her on our podcast today, for all our Aussie viewers and world viewers as well, to discuss all things judging, criteria, also Becky's journey as well and how she got to where she is today. So we're super excited about getting her on. And Becky, thank you so much for coming on, like a Saturday afternoon for you, and we're just so grateful that and that you've given us your time. So thank you.
To be here. I like the premise of what you guys are doing and just having these conversations, with women, for all things in the sport. I'm always happy to support that. So I applaud what you guys are doing.
Thank you. I mean, we're just two little Aussie girls from, down here, literally small country towns. And when we first got started, it was literally, I didn't even know how to, set up a podcast. Neither did Rose. And
no idea.
Wasn't it like we literally just started pressing buttons on our computer until
yeah.
Initially we were like, because we were so inspired by FemFlex Friday, I've been for gosh knows how long, and those ladies, Whitney, Camille, everyone are just amazing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like we're gonna get this big production going and what have you. And then we're like, we didn't know where that was going to go. And then I said to Rose one day, I'm like, when we're in COVID, like, and everyone was working from home, like it was on Zoom. Why don't we just do Zoom?
Yeah, so, much easier.
Yeah, it turned out to be. And then she was just like, we'll just keep pressing buttons until we work it out. And she's like, hang on a minute, there's a record button here. So it's kind of how it came to be.
That's awesome. That's kind of what I do with technology anyway. So
yeah. So Becky, you've been involved in the sport for a while now, and especially for our viewers in Australia, who might not know you as well as the US, because you're quite a decorated judge and figure and advocate for women in bodybuilding, like pretty much in the States and everywhere else around the world. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how it got started in bodybuilding and fitness?
Sure. So I started competing probably about 6 months after I just started weight training. I went to the gym just for something healthy to do, and saw that actually my trainer, his girlfriend, did a show. And I remember looking at her photos and I was like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. And he's like, actually, maybe you could. Your genetics are decent. You might be able to do that. So I did a show. I dieted only for 8 weeks. I looked crazy. I looked absolutely nuts on stage, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I feel like that's kind of how it goes. You either fall in love with it or you just know it's not for you. And so I decided that I wanted to do other shows. So I got connected with a trainer who was more versed in, competition and dieting for females and stuff like that. And I started out in figure because there was no other option. It was bodybuilding, figure, or fitness. And I considered doing fitness. I have a gymnastics background, but at that time, just so much like the routine practice as well as trying to build muscle was too much for me. So stuck to figure. I think even my coach didn't really anticipate I was ever going to do very well because I was always smaller. But I took, every little bit, every detail that I could and maximized it for myself, which is what I teach people now. Like, until your physique is the part, your posing, your suit, your hair, your makeup, your presence on stage should be 100%, because that can get you over somebody else who maybe has a better physique but doesn't know how to present it. So I really used all those things to my advantage, made it to the national level and started doing well. And then I won my pro card at NPC Nationals, which was a shock, I think, to a lot of people. Okay. I did well. I was doing well at that point, but I think even my coach was surprised that I actually had the determination to get that far. And then from there, I went to compete in pro figure for a number of years. I took a break for health reasons, just my body was really beat up and stuff. I think that was 2010 I took off, and that coincidentally is when I started judging. Yeah, like I just thought to myself, what am I going to do if I can't come back from this? If I can't compete, I really love this industry and this sport. How else can I be involved? And someone suggested judging. And so I did test judging. And as you know, like some people love it. Some people really hate it. I've had friends who've done it and they're like, no, my mind just doesn't work like that. I'm not interested. I don't want to sit in one spot for 12 hours judging a show. For me, I really took to it and I enjoyed it and I enjoyed the process. And I felt like this is a way I can be involved and a way that I can give back, hopefully, by being a fair judge, providing good feedback, encouragement, honesty, just about, any kind of guidance that I can offer to people. So I continued to judge. I actually did come back and compete until 2014, which is when I retired. I switched to bikini from figure. I honestly didn't want to do it. Like I like figure the best, but it was so much better for my body. And that's something I tell women too. Thank goodness we have so many divisions now, because you can find something that is not only how you want to look walking around in your daily life, but also maybe something that fits your genetics well. I see, in the past, I saw a lot of women either really trying to add muscle like me for figure, and it's so hard. The off seasons are brutal. You really can't take any time off. Or like even bikini, some women running their legs down because they had too much muscle and really just not being able to eat much, doing a ton of cardio to try to fit that mold, which is why I'm happy we have wellness now for those ladies that are more muscular, come from athletics. So yeah, bikini was the best option for me, and it was much easier on me. Since I had like 8 years to build a foundation of muscle and figure, going to bikini was just much, much easier. And then I retired after that. And I've just been, what's that?
That was in 2014.
Yes. Yep. And just kept judging. And I would have had to retire at a certain point anyway to judge in the IFBB, at least to head judge, because of course it'd be a conflict of interest. But I was ready to do that. And the privilege of judging, I mean, I'm such a fan of the sport, is the coolest experience for me to not only get to, send people to the Olympia and then judge the Olympia. Like I'm front row for my absolute favorite sport. And I have to pinch myself every time. Like, I'm like, I can't believe I actually get to see this, let alone judge it, but I get to see this in person. It's something that's never lost on me.
It must be just euphoric, like the most amazing bodies and the best bodies. I
Yes.
believe that the IFBB produces the best bodies in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Am I biased? Yeah, probably, but it's just an opinion. And like to get to that Olympia stage, like how did you do you remember the moment you were asked to judge the Olympia? What was that like?
I just about like, I texted a bunch of people, the judges that I worked with and my friends and stuff. I was so excited about it. Because it's something you can't really ask to do. They ask you when you're ready. It's the same thing with head judging. You don't really ask for that position. It's kind of when they feel you're ready for it that they start assigning you to different things. So just to know that, they trusted me enough and that they felt I was skilled enough to be at that level. I'll never forget that feeling. It was great.
Can you take us a little bit about like how you got that call? Were you expecting it? Who was it that was on the other end? Like just the build up to that. And maybe two questions there. Like how many shows had you judged leading up to that point where there was a transition over to the Olympia?
Well, it's an email, actually. I get all my shows via email. They just ask you, are you free on this date? Can you judge the show? And that's how that came over as well. And I had to look at it, to double check because I had been asked to do the amateur Olympia as well. And I had to make sure, like, is this a duplicate or is this like the real thing? And when I realized it wasn't, of course, I was really excited. And I know they knew I was really excited at the office and everything, that I really appreciated it. And to that point, like I judged a lot of shows. I'm trying to think, I don't think I could even count how many shows I judged, but I think some of what played into it is the ability and the experience of judging internationally that really broadened my skills. Judging big shows like the Romanian Muscle Fest, where it's all positions, it's open bodybuilding all the way down to bikini, and just really managing that many athletes on stage. And international judging is different than in the States because you kind of don't know how the production's going to go. And so you have to deal with all of those things too. You're kind of the gatekeeper, and, you know, the buck stops with you if things don't go right. And I think that's something that people don't realize about judging, and especially head judging, is we're responsible ultimately for the production of the show and making sure that things go right and making sure it's smooth for the athletes. It's safe for the athletes. Everybody knows what they're doing. They're having a good experience. We're responsible for even just making sure people are centered on stage for the photos. You know, photos are a really big deal for our athletes. So there's a lot that goes into it outside of just judging the show. You have to control all those variables. And especially, you know, internationally, when you're maybe the one representative from the States, that's a lot of it that goes into it too. So a little more pressure, but you learn a lot from that. And I feel like I really skilled up with that too.
I think I've actually been at shows before and watched the judges, you know, quickly trying to eat at their table while they're trying to, you know, to judge, and you think, oh my goodness, like it's so much bigger of a day than what people would ever realize.
Yes. And we don't mind it. Like, I don't mind it at all. And I know my peers don't mind it. I know sometimes people think if we're eating, like we're not paying attention to them. It's like, no, we're paying attention, but we have to eat too.
That's right. I always think that, oh my goodness, these poor people, they are so time poor that they're actually having to try and drink water and have a quick bite to eat, and all while trying to manage all of those other dynamics that I don't think as an athlete you think about that. You don't sort of think about all those other, you know, the centering and why our photos actually come back looking nice. It's because you guys are sort of gatekeeping all of that.
Yes. Yeah.
So on your journey to being a judge, there would have been some great teachers that you had, mentors that you know, got, you know, that you were inspired by, that you worked with. Who would you say, or it doesn't have to be one, it can be a number of them, were your greatest teachers on this road? You've been judging.
I would say Gary Udit is my mentor, and he really took me from being like a local level judge to giving me the opportunity to judge nationally, take the national test, and then preparing me to judge on a pro level. I'm one of the first judges that went through almost kind of a training program where they sent me out with different judges to shadow them, see their style, and really teach me, you know, this is how you do scores, because we do manual scoring sometimes. And this is how you do it. This is when you send the scores in. This is who you send them to. This is, you know, even how do you break a tie? Because there is a way to break a tie. And explaining all the details to me and then giving me the experience. And then they sent me out before I started head judging on a pro level. They sent me out with Sandy Williamson quite a bit, who is, you know, my greatest inspiration, just because she's a female and she's done so much for women in our sport. I mean, we really owe so much of this opportunity to her. And she loves the athletes. She wants the best for all the athletes. And her heart is really in being the women's representative. And I remember when I was judged by her, she was the only one that smiled back at me, which like really, you know, stuck with me. And actually, I'll say Bev Weinberger did too. But I didn't get judged by her as often. But I remember thinking like that really, I really remembered that. And that had the power to make me feel calmer and all of a sudden just a little bit more confident. And I was like, I would like to give that back if I can at all. So she was a huge inspiration, and really Gary and everyone in Pittsburgh, you know, the peers I work with there, like Bill Sibilia, Jack Sullivan, you know, really Tyler, just everyone working with me and giving me constant feedback has helped me to get to this point. They've all poured a lot into me.
And that's, you know, and this is obviously for the people listening as well. It's not just like you get a call and you rock up and you do a show.
Yes.
There is professional training. There are tests that you are going through.
Yeah.
You know, you have to prove yourself capable of being able to cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and working within the best interest of the athlete that's on stage. And like you said, being fair and being honest and creating that environment for when each and every single one of those athletes come out on stage and you're giving them your undivided attention.
Yes. And that's something I think a lot of people don't know, is that there are tests to judge on a national level, and then you're test judging as well to be a pro judge. And what that involves is you're scoring the same show, and then your scores are compared to see how accurate you are, but also you have to hand in your top 5 before the head judge calls it, which is really the determining factor. Like, I don't think people know we do that, but it's like, I feel like most people could probably figure out how to judge once the group's on stage, right? Like, that's a little easier, but picking out from a group of 30 athletes who the top 5 are, that really tells us, does somebody have an eye for the criteria? Can they do this quickly? Can they decisively say, these are the best that I would want to see in that call out? So it's a little more stringent than people probably think.
Yeah, and I mean, the understanding that you would have to have of each category as well. So you would have to have such an in-depth understanding of each criteria and how it's weighted, because I'm assuming that some categories are weighted differently in terms of muscularity, you know, symmetry, balance. Those types of things are weighted differently for each of the categories.
And it's a tough call, especially in shows where maybe nobody fits the criteria exactly. You know, the Olympia is tough to judge because you've got the best athletes in the world, but you also have athletes that match the criteria there. So you have options that you can say, okay, this is exactly what we've been looking for. Sometimes the other shows, and as you get down to the regional and local level, then it becomes really hard, because it's like, none of these athletes, you know, if they're starting out, no one might match the criteria exactly. So you have to decide which is more important. Is it conditioning? Is it muscle? And I think subconsciously, it's just like, it's second nature for me now, but it's something you really have to learn and hone in.
Yes. And I think that's why sometimes, you know, you do hear athletes or coaches or even the audience members will all have a say. They'll say, oh, well, I think this person should have won. But I think when you understand how judging works and you understand that, as you were saying, there could be people on the stage that they look really different, and you might be looking at each of those individually and going, wow, what a physique, but it doesn't quite meet the criteria, you know, in this way or that way, whereas this person might meet more of those elements of the criteria, so they win. And people are like, oh, we don't understand that decision, but there's all that kind of, all of those different parts of it to consider. And so it's quite complicated.
It is. And, you know, I keep reminding people, we can only judge what shows up on stage, you know, so like bikini. And that's something else I say about like bikini and wellness. We don't want girls that are too hard, too conditioned, you know, no graininess, the thin skin, the vascularity. We don't want to see all of that. Sometimes someone wins that looks like that. And I always tell people, look at the rest of the class. They were probably all like that, and somebody has to win, or they were all like that. And then there were just some people who are so out of shape that you can't really reward that either. So it's like, you have to look at it in its totality to kind of understand we picked the best that we possibly could.
Yeah.
And if you look at this year's Olympia bikini winner, Maureen, she was
Perfect.
You know,
Yes.
she like there was the condition of the bikini girls like that I had been seeing. I was like, holy moly! Like,
we were talking, weren't we, Lisa, saying, oh my goodness, we're supposed to be making our pro debuts this year, and we were thinking, I don't even know if we should be getting on stage as figure athletes at this point in time, because some of the girls just seemed so conditioned and so muscular. And we were like, wow. But then seeing how it all was judged and who was rewarded at the Olympia was really, it was really good, because, you know, you sort of went, oh, wow, she definitely wasn't the hardest on stage, but she fitted bikini so well. She was so suited to that criteria, Maureen. She looked amazing.
I thought so too. And I thought that's just what stuck out to me. She was just a perfect example. I really thought the top 4 were great, honestly. And it was tough between them and Jen Dory. It was super tight in scoring between those two, because Jen Dory is the same. You know, if you look at her physique, she matches the criteria as well. She's not overly conditioned. She's not overly muscular. It just, you know, 2 different physiques, you know, the criteria looks different on both of them. And we just went with Maureen, and I think she's a great example too. And hopefully, you know, we always tell people the Olympia winner is your standard, and that's who you go by. And, you know, you see these other shows and maybe people do win who look a little harder, but again, the Olympia winner is the standard. And these other pros who may win more muscular or they're a little more conditioned, when they get to the Olympia, they will not win. Like that, if it doesn't match the criteria, they will be placed accordingly. And like the same thing with Sid in figure, actually, you know, she has crazy dimensions and proportions, but in person, she's actually not super big. She's little. And it's just like, you know, her proportions, and that's the game, right? It's an illusion.
yes.
So to look at her, she's not overly muscular. She's just got these crazy genetics. And so when she hits her pose, she just like opens up and just blossoms.
Yeah, that's so true. And I was really excited about her winning that as well, because I was like, this is just a really good message that then gets sent out amongst all the figure girls that, look, it's about proportions, it's about your symmetry, it's about your balance from top to bottom and side to side and those types of things.
Yeah. On that note as well, like if you look at, you know, Sid as well, she's sixth win as Miss Olympia. There hasn't, like, she's evolved, but it's not like she's whacked on 10 kilos of muscle, and there might be maybe a kilo or 2 here or there. You know, she's learned how to present herself better, for example, or maybe there might be a little bit of tightening up, but really she's like the same and consistent the whole way through. Like gone out and, like we talked about, gotten too much harder or put on too much more muscle or tried to complicate things too much.
Yes, and that is so important. And that's something that we try to tell the athletes, because I think when the divisions start to get kind of out of control, or you start to see athletes like looking like maybe they should jump to the next division, I mean, that's kind of the nature of elite athletes, right? Is that they're going to want to push the boundaries. You know, everybody wants to see, like, how much more muscular can I get? How much leaner can I get? But the top athletes know not to step over that line, to hold it, you know, in a place where they still meet the criteria. And that's Sid for sure. That's Andrea Shaw, who is our bodybuilding champion. You know, she's going to work on bringing up a couple of points, but we all said to her, it's not about size. You don't have to pack on size. For her, she is not the biggest bodybuilder, but absolutely her proportions are the best. Her density, her balance, her symmetry, all of that is the best. So it's like, don't mess with success. Like, even in bodybuilding, it's like, it's not about being bigger, bigger, bigger all the time if you sacrifice any of those other things.
Yeah.
point right there, Becky. So if you're as a Olympia judge, the first thing that you look at is that like proportions.
Yes, I would say shape and proportion is very important. I mean, you can't be up there and have really great shape, but not have, dieted. Like there is a level of conditioning that's required, but yes, the proportion is very important. Even on the local level, I've seen, or the amateur level, I've had coaches say, well, my athlete was the best conditioned. Why didn't they win? It's like, it's not a dieting contest. It's bodybuilding. Being up there and being skinny isn't going to really help you out. We are looking for muscle, even in bikini. Like we don't like to see really thin women, thin arms, thin legs, no muscle. That's not the idea. It is still bodybuilding. So when it comes down to it, that's what we're looking for.
So let's talk about muscularity for a minute since we're on it. And I think we look at the evolution of the sport. Both yourself, Becky, even myself and Rose, we've been, doing this for a couple of decades now, and I look at where I started. I've always been in figure, so has Rose. What it looked like 20 years ago compared to what figure looks like today, and we know it has evolved. Okay, you can see how they've changed and how they've evolved and what have you. So if we're looking at muscularity in the in the four categories, from bikini, wellness, figure and physique, even bodybuilding for that matter, when we're looking at how much muscle you actually need, how would you break that down from a judge's perspective for each one of those categories?
For bikini, it's definitely, you want that feminine, that hourglass shape on a foundation of muscle. Like that's how you have the glutes, you have rounder shoulders, a tighter waist, shapely legs. The difference in bikini and through all the divisions is conditioning, right? Like we don't want you too conditioned, but you can't just get up there with, no muscle at all either. So it's a foundation of muscle for the feminine shape. I would say we start with that for bikini. Then you go up to figure and you get a little bit more, still same balanced proportions. You want the same muscularity top to bottom, unlike wellness. But there, like we start to see back depth comes into play, where bikini, we don't care about that. It's just about the shape, the silhouette, more or less. Figure, we're starting to look at a little bit more depth there, maybe a little bit more completeness in the physique, like your upper chest and your shoulders. Like it doesn't have to be so much muscle, but you want to see a complete physique with no gaps. So you're starting to look at the details there. Wellness is kind of bikini on top, but even more than figure on the bottom, right? Like serious,
right.
mature.
I was going to ask about that particular point. So, because I had noticed how well developed these girls were, and I'm thinking, my God, am I supposed to be having legs like this as a figure girl now? But that's great to know. So no, that's good. Good.
Yes.
To actually know that. Yeah.
Yeah, they have, their glutes are so much more developed, and their legs just, the depth of their legs, they have a little bit bigger hamstrings usually. So for them, that's the focus. So definitely
training 3 to 4 times a week, their legs. So it's very leg dominant training. Yeah.
And I encourage anyone who's considering wellness to follow those girls on social media and see their leg training. It's impressive. And I've seen some of them like challenge the bodybuilders to a leg training session. They won't do it because they're like,
that is so good.
Like,
go girls.
Yeah. And those women have been doing this. Like in Brazil, this has been a popular division for them, and just a popular look. Like culturally, they have kind of the genetics for it, but it's also very popular culturally. So they've been training this way for a long time. And so I think that's why, those top girls are just so far ahead of the rest of the division that's still coming up and learning it, because they've trained that hard for so long to get that depth.
Yes. Yeah. And I totally agree. I remember I went to, I used to do swimming That's how that was my entry into the sport. But then I went to the World Masters Games, and there was a Brazil team at the World Masters Games, and I just remember looking at their lower bodies thinking, oh my God, those girls had the most amazing glutes. Like, they were just so, every one of them in the team. And that was before I'd ever taken up weightlifting or anything like that. Could not compute. How do these women get these glutes?
Yep, they train hard for them, that's for sure.
So
absolutely.
You know, I think they're impressive. Like, I look at the legs and I'm like, holy Mary, Mother and Joseph, my legs will never be like that.
Yes.
And
yes,
and then we're looking at physique, right? So physique, that next step up in terms of muscularity. You know, what are the judges specifically looking for in terms? Are they looking for a lot more size? Are they looking for more of the depth in the muscle?
I would say it's more depth. It doesn't have to be more size. Like, if you look at Natalia, she's not so much bigger than she was in figure. It's a little bit more about the maturity, I would say. And, you know, you want a little bit more density. Like, they're posing different for you to see the density, you know, a side chest and back double bicep. Like, we're going to see different things than you see for figure. And one thing we do try to curtail in that division is too much muscle. You know, from there, we're like, okay, maybe you should go to bodybuilding. Like, if just because you have a ton of muscle, you know, and you want to say your women's physique, it doesn't mean it's going to fit the division, and it doesn't mean it'll get rewarded. Andrea Shaw was in physique. So, and as soon as she went to bodybuilding, she started just winning everything. She was just in the wrong division. And I see some girls like that, you know, even still today. Like, you'll see some physique girls with really muscular upper bodies or arms. And it's like, gosh, if you can just add a little bit more to your lower body, step up into bodybuilding, and you'll just, you know, succeed with flying colors.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was actually my next question. It's like, you know, you've got, you know, an athlete who goes, I really want to just be in bikini, but their bodies genetically, you know, they look at a weight and they just explode.
Yes.
And put on. So what would be your advice to women in the sport, irrespective of the categories that they're in, when it comes to picking the right category for them?
I always want women to, you know, pick the category for what they're going to feel happiest, you know, physique wise. But I have to think, you know, if you're not genetically meant to be, you know, in a smaller physique, then, you know, that's going to be really taxing on your health. And that's probably not going to give you a lot of longevity competing. And then you also think, if you never really get down to the size you need to for the criteria, are you okay competing in a division that you love, but not getting rewarded? Because you won't get rewarded if you don't meet the criteria. It's like girls used to, in bikini, they'd move their hair off their back because they wanted photos showing their back development or whatever. And I was like, okay, but you're also showing us judges something that may hurt you. So are you doing it for the photo and you're okay with sacrificing a placing? You know, kind of think about that. You know, how accepting are you of the outcome because of the choice you've made? And I really like to see people find their category and accept that, and even embrace that maybe my body belongs in this division. And usually when they switch, like, it's a sigh of relief, because, you know, the training is just more in line with their genetics, and just their body responds better because they're not trying to, you know, fit into this little box over here that their body really is kind of rebelling against anyway. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, and you, in your over a decade now judging, would have seen the effects of athletes being in categories that maybe, you know, wasn't best for them in terms of, you know, longevity in the sports and the implications that have occurred from that. And I guess, do you want to share a little bit about that? Not specific athletes in essence, but more so what are some of the health implications? Because you've also been the athlete as well, and
Yeah.
have seen and experienced it firsthand.
I think, stress on the body and not taking a break is really difficult on most people's bodies. And, I think finding a sweet spot where you are able to compete, at your highest frequency while still staying healthy is important. And that runs the gamut. Like Ashley Coltwasser, she's able to compete all the time year round, and she pretty much looks like that all the time. But it took her finding, exactly how to train. And, of course, she's very genetically gifted to be able to do that all the time and stay healthy. And I know it was a process for her. For a lot of people, that isn't the case. And, rest and recovery, and changing up your foods and all of that is so important for longevity. Where I've seen it go sideways, and I totally get it, is athletes that are, say, on the cusp of going to the Olympia or getting their pro card. Like they're so close and they just want to keep going. And there's a point where your body just starts to say, like, I've had enough. I need a break. And they will keep pushing it and maybe even achieve their goal. But there's then a lot to unwind from all of that stress. Of just constantly going. And we all have, different thresholds for what we can accept. And like, say your body is just naturally, the bikini type, you might be able to do 6 shows a year, 6, 7, 8 shows a year without much stress, but it's different for everyone. And I think listening to your body and getting feedback from your coach, and also blood work, that's something, that I think everybody should do. And I actually think that's a great thing that is becoming more common in bodybuilding, is doing your blood work, checking your hormones. And that can find something that maybe you even just have a predisposition towards. It could uncover something that has nothing to do with bodybuilding, but it's just important to keeping you healthy. And I think just really looking at that and the underlying health, and just your ability to keep doing this, long term. I think that's where it catches up to people when they just push it past the point that they probably know that they shouldn't be doing that, but we're all competitive and we've all done it.
Yeah.
We've all done it. And Rose is competing in her pro show this year. I'm doing mine in Feb next year. And we were talking about it, weren't we, Rose? And
Yeah.
go and get your blood work done. Let's have a look. Let's see where everything's at. I use that with my own clients, even just the general population, at least once a year, just to see.
Yep.
And then in this sport, and there's no line. You've got natural competitors, and you've got the ones that choose the route of being enhanced and what have you. And that's even more important.
Yes.
There's a lot of things, with parts, and what have you, that I've seen firsthand over the last decade as well. And it's just important to really enforce that if you know where your markers are at, your body, you might in your head, want to be getting ready for a show, but your body's not where your head's at, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You need to take a couple of steps back and kind of reset, recoup, balance everything. Then your prep is going to be so much more easier, isn't it? And more, and you'll have that longevity in the sport. Like Rose and I have had, and even to yourself, before you took on judging full time as well. So I'm just so glad you primed that point as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's such an important.
There's another show too. That's what we always say. There's always another show. So if your body can't do it now, it's fine. If whether it's your health or your lifestyle, like something in your personal life comes up, there's always another show.
Yeah. And on that note, another show, it's not like there's been less shows. There's been, as the years have gone on, more and more shows have available, and over in the States and even Europe, to that extent in the UK, there's shows every single weekend.
Yes.
Yes. Every weekend.
Yes, plenty of opportunity.
So many opportunities. And I was speaking to Boliana, and she's her and her partner, they do multiple shows, what have you, and she loves doing it. She's like, do as many as you can. And she's like, a genetic freak like that, you know, and
She is.
I couldn't do that. I'm like, you know, 1, maybe 2 shows per year, and that's the best for me. But it's, you know, you made that point that we all have our own thresholds, and that was a really, I think that's a really valuable point to make.
Very.
Just knowing your tipping point, and
Yeah.
that's going to give you that longevity in the sport. And rather than, you know, competing with like, we're competing with other people, but metaphorically speaking, like, sit in your own lane, and you're going to have the biggest success when you actually just kind of stick to that, you know. You don't respect those parameters of health and your body. So that's, I'm glad you said that, especially from an Olympia level as well, because everyone that's listening to this, they're going to hear that as well. No one knows you the way that you know you know.
That's right. Yep.
And it's that big slice of humble pie that sometimes you need to, you know, take and have a step back. And, you know, 3 years ago, I probably didn't have enough size, but now I have enough size. So getting bigger is not, you know, what am I in kilos now? Like 60 kilos, and I'm 5'1". And I think that is in pounds. Is that 120? Is that 120 pounds?
I don't know. I'm terrible with that. So
let me convert. I can convert. What was it again? You're at 60.
So 60 kilos, right? And I'm 157 centimeters. So I'm like,
So about 132 pounds.
I'm 132 pounds, and this is my off season. I stay around like 8 to 10% all year round, and that's just me genetically. So putting size on always really hard for me, but I don't need any more size. And you know, and you know, I know that, you know, I'm never going to be a Sid Gillen, and I'm never going to be that, because I'm not them. And I think that's important as well to hear from, you know, yourself, Becky, is that don't try and be like anyone other than yourself.
Yes. That's something that Tyler said often. You know, we always get these questions, or even see, you know, people emulating someone else, like to the point where they're almost, you know, wearing the same suit, doing the same posing. And it's like, that is just going to remind us of that other person. And that probably doesn't flatter you. So do what it is that matches your physique. And just, you know, by understanding the criteria and reading it as it's published, as long as those things are true for you, however that shows up on your natural, unique physique is the right thing. But, you know, don't even, you know, try to emulate somebody else, because we are all so different.
Love that. Now, yeah, so you go. Yep.
I was just going to say, it could be that uniqueness that you bring to the stage that is the thing that gets you over the line of winning or not winning a show.
It's that it factor quite often, and that comes from women who are confident up there, and, you know, confident in their look and confident in what they present. I mean, it's just human nature for us as judges to be drawn to that. It's a subconscious thing. So, you know, being confident in whatever it is that you uniquely bring often really translates well to the judges.
I love that. I really love that.
That is beautiful. Yeah.
Being unique and in yourself, and you love that. Because you'll be looking at hundreds of bodies over a 12-hour period, right? So, and yes, there's certain parameters that we need to stick within. Like, here's what you do with your T-walk. It's one thing at the front and one post at the front, 2 at the back. But then how you present that and how you bring that in, what you said there was really special. And I want to make a point of it, is be unique. Now, you know, just be you. Don't be in that.
Yeah, a good example I think of that is like hairstyles and bikini. For a while, I know when I competed, everyone said you had to have long, dark, straight hair. And that was it. That was all that was winning. Well, those happened to be physiques that were winning, but it was never a requirement. And now, you know, you see girls with all different, you know, hairs, curly, straight, different colors. You know, we have had girls with short hair, really short hair. We have a pro in the US that is bald. You know, it's all in what is your look and how can you carry it off on stage. And I've actually seen some girls who have tried to I guess, conform. Like they have shorter hair, they'll wear a wig or extensions or something. And I can tell they don't feel confident in it. And they'll usually ask for feedback afterwards. And I'll ask, like, are you confident in that? And the answer is usually no. And I'm like, well, I can tell. So do what you're confident with. And I bet that it's going to just take you to the next level. And your presentation is going to look so much better. And it always pays off for them.
And that's such a good point as well, is that your confidence is what's going to make you stand out.
Yes. Yep, for sure.
So, if you're giving advice to our listeners today in terms of how to bring their confidence out, because here, especially here in Australia, we don't have like that women's NPC workshop that you had.
Yeah.
People, complete sellout. Rose and I were watching it and we're like, oh my God, I want to jump on a plane right now.
Yeah.
It's like an expo. It was insane. So
it was awesome.
Yeah, we don't have that here, but we do have what we call state posing workshops, and like just where we get a couple of the pros, and Tony Doherty would come in and he'd talk about basically how the shows are going to be run this year, in terms of how you would say how to bring your confidence out. And this is like by the time you get to the Olympia level, you don't need to worry about that. Like you've got that
right.
Amateur level, maybe someone who's just starting out in the sport, maybe someone who has done the sport and loves the sport, but just hasn't found themselves, right? That sweet spot where they feel most confident. Mentally, what kind of process, what are some tips that you could give them to help them find that way?
I think a big confidence booster when you're on stage is just having practiced your posing. A lot of people kind of get deer in the headlights when they first step foot on stage, especially if it's their first show. But I think you can remove a lot of those nerves and a lot of the worry if you just practice your posing consistently. Even the pros talk about it. It's, not only a conditioning thing, because we all know like your lower back hurts and your feet hurt from being in those shoes. And it's those isometric contractions and stuff to hit your poses are very different, and you have to get conditioned for it. And you want to make sure that you're always in the proper posture for when the judges are looking at you. So it's not only the conditioning, but I think just knowing that your routine so well. For me, I always thought, even if I just get on stage and I totally blank out, like my body knows what to do. It's like autopilot, right? It's like doing a dance routine or gymnastics. Like my body knows what to do. It will go through the motions. I'm going to be fine. So I feel like that takes a lot of the jitters out. And that also shows confidence too, right? Like you can hit your poses, what you're doing up there. So you can hit them solidly and confidently. And in creating, your posing, I think working with someone who can really tell you what poses to best flatter your physique is super important. So once you've done that and you have, whatever your routine is, your presentation, practicing that as much as possible just sets the foundation for confidence, I think. And I think also just checking all the details, the stuff you can control. Because, come show day, your physique is what it is, the conditioning is what it is, you've done all the work, but the things that you can control as of that day are stuff like your tan and your hair and makeup and things like that. And I know something that helped me feel confident was getting my makeup professionally done. If that's ever an option, and someone like me, I'm not great at makeup, that was something that I always did because I knew I felt really confident with professional makeup. And it was one less thing to stress about for me. Like that was something that was always very stressful. Like I couldn't get the lashes on right. I felt like I was going to glue my eye shut. Like, just I was terrible with it. And so
on that note, with getting your makeup professionally done, there's getting your makeup professionally done and getting your makeup professionally done. So, you might have someone that's really good in, stage makeup, and then someone else that's really good in glamour makeup, more for photo shoots, for example. So on that note as well, it's getting your makeup professionally done, but getting someone that has experience in fitness and like the, so the
Yeah.
shapes are the same, because we know that the face is going to be slightly lighter than the body, for example, where so that's important as well.
Yes, we always say that, don't just go to, the local makeup store, whatever it is, and get someone who looks like they know how to do makeup, because chances are they've never seen bodybuilding makeup and the tan will shock them. And then you're like, oh yeah, and it has to somewhat go, it has to somewhat blend, and they won't know what to do with it. So definitely go to somebody who knows bodybuilding makeup, who can do it and knows how to work with the tan and everything. That is a great call.
You're so right. I remember my very first show. I got my girlfriend who was a makeup artist to do it, and my face was orange.
Oh,
orange.
I think we all have had these stories.
Like patchy, because back in those days we had something, I don't know if you remember this, it was called Dream Tan.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I remember Dream Tan.
So she mixed the Dream Tan in with the foundation.
Oh my God.
I can only imagine.
Oh, I have to find a photo and put it up. Literally, I looked like I'd been in the solarium for too long. It was tragic. And I had bright blue eyeshadow and like bright red lipstick, and it was all blended in. I had patchy spots everywhere, and I had to rock up on stage like that. There was nothing that we could do in those days.
At that point, you can't really fix it. Yeah.
You can't fix it. Yeah. So it's really important to know, not just getting your makeup professionally done, which is part of that confidence. It's like, who is getting it done? And that's why, the league as well, they have the makeup girls and guys backstage, or they've got, these are the people we would recommend because they've worked with our athletes, for example.
Yeah, and that's always a good place to look, like for help with tanning or hair and makeup. Like, look who the show recommends, because they should have done their due diligence as well to make sure this is someone that's qualified, has done it before, has, a body of work that they can show that they know what they're doing. And so that's always a good resource if people don't know otherwise.
Okay, so that would be the next tip, perfect your posing so it's in autopilot. So your body, and I like what you said, your body just knows what to do. It can just
what to do.
Straight into it. It's kind of like going into the gym and training for the first time. You don't know how to squat, but then the more you go over and over and over again, your body knows what it's getting ready for.
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing just about confidence is to have perspective, like real world perspective. Like, we go into a bodybuilding show and you may not be the best, you may not even place, but take a step back and realize that you're pretty much the 1% of people in this entire world as far as health and fitness and even your appearance. And I think knowing that and really being able to keep that perspective, anyone who gets on stage should feel proud. And I've had girls say to me, oh, I didn't do well, I don't want to post my show photos online. I'm like, I think you should post those, because everybody is going to say you got robbed, you should have won that show, you look better than you ever did in your entire life. Like, your friends and family are your biggest fans, and they don't know bodybuilding, they don't even care. You look amazing to them, and they've seen you work, they've seen you diet and train and have all this discipline, and that's something to really be proud of. And it's not always about a placing, and keeping in mind that you're like a superstar to everybody who knows you. I think that that's a really great feeling, and that regardless of how you do at the show, you can still be really proud of that. And hopefully people feel that, that helps propel them into the show as well.
That's lovely. I love that point. Like, you're a superstar in your own network, and like, if you're feeling that energy as you're walking out on stage, you can see it, you can bring it to light.
Yes.
I know that when I got my pro card last April, a little bit late to the table, 51 shows. Got there.
Wow, good for you though. That's quite a career. That's awesome. Yeah.
So one of the most, it'll be one of the most memorable moments of my whole entire life. And I've competed, like I said, that was 51 shows, but Nothing competed, nothing compared to, and it wasn't the fact that it was the pro card, it was the fact that my son was sitting in the audience and he's like, that's my mummy, you know, and I could hear him from backstage just before I was coming out. And Rose, you were there as well. You heard
he was, that's my mommy. Like it was beautiful.
I didn't hear anyone else. I didn't see anyone else. I just saw my little boy, and it was like, I'm going to do him proud when I'm out there. You know, I'm doing this for him. There was just there's an energy that you feel inside of yourself that it just feels like home, and it feels right. And you forget that you're getting judged. You forget.
Yeah.
It's such a great place to be. So you bringing that point up, I'm like, that is great. We're going to write that down.
Yeah, definitely, because it reminded me of one of my favorite shows, which was when I had my family and friends in the audience, and I still watch that video of myself walking out on stage and think, oh my God, why can't I recreate that? Because I was so confident, and my presentation that day was just spot on. But that gives me context now to think that's probably why, because I was so confident, because I knew there was just one group in that audience that I could do no wrong in front of. They were there going, you are the best, you know. So it gives you a lot of inner confidence.
Yes. And you see sometimes even athletes, like maybe they don't even look the part. Like some of their journey might have been they lost 100 pounds and maybe they still have 30 to go, but they get on stage and their friends and family are so excited for them and they're excited. Like I love to see that when they're confident, like they know they're not going to win the show, but for them getting on stage was the celebration of all this hard work that they've put in. And most of them are so confident up there, and that's what it should be about, is the celebration of your journey and what you've been through.
And we've all been to a show. I know we've been at the same show, Lisa, and we've noticed this, and there is nothing worse than seeing someone come up on stage and they are just so uncomfortable, because then the whole crowd starts to squirm and it's uncomfortable for everyone. So confidence is key.
Yes. And I try to encourage that, even if I can from the judging table, like catch their eye or something and smile, like kind of to remind them, like, it's okay. We're all here, you know, just relax, enjoy. That's what we're all here for. It's going to be fine. Hopefully that's what I can convey to people.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And you know, that's and on that note, since we're talking about that, we had we put basically a little story out to say, ask Becky any question you like, you know. And we had some feedback, so we've got the questions here. And our first, if that's okay, a little bit, but so our first question was, what is the absolute most common mistake you see in and on the MPC stage? Is it the posing? Is it the shape? Is it the overall look not polished enough?
I would say there are posing mistakes for sure. Like in bikini, it's bending over at the waist, I would say, too far, because it flattens the glutes out. It makes them look bottom heavy. It's inappropriate from where we're sitting from the judge's angle. You can sometimes see the same thing in wellness. And even though that's supposed to be lower body dominant, it still destroys the overall proportion we want to see, because the upper body disappears. I would say in figure, it's another posing mistake. You know, they have the arms out too far.
Yes.
You know, they don't bring the arms in. So like the delts are flattened, the lats are narrowed. That's probably the biggest thing I see there. And then physique and bodybuilding, it's, I would say, control of the midsection, you know, just not controlling that. That's a really big deal to us. We don't want to see distended midsections. And, you know, some people can't help it just for, you know, maybe, you know, digestive issues or things like that, but you have to be able to control it on stage.
Yeah.
That's what we always say. Like, you cannot let that drop for any reason, really, in any division, men or women, from bikini to men's open. you've got to keep that midsection under control, and you've got to practice your posing and be conditioned enough to do that.
That is right. When you say condition, we're not saying like literally like ripped with six pack, although
Yes.
we're saying conditioned in like having that endurance to be able, and stamina
Yes.
to be able
Yeah.
to
Yep. That's
you know,
exactly right.
midsection or that isometric contraction for as long as the judges require, especially like more so like I was always like, you know, pose like you've got 50 people in your lineup.
Yes.
You know, when I'm teaching my posing to some of my figure clients, I'm like, okay, you can hold that for 3 minutes now. You know, and like, oh, it feels like I'm here for hours. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it could be that way. It could be that way at a show. You know, the comparisons could be really long. They could leave you on stage. You know, there are times when they dismiss you off stage after your call out, but they might tell you to step back in line. And that's not the time to relax either, because we're looking for our next call outs. And often we call the first call out back at the end. So you're never done until you step off stage, and it can be a long time. And it is really something that you need endurance for sure.
100%. You see the ones that aren't or haven't practiced as much because they'll be shaking on stage.
Yes.
That's a prime giveaway that you haven't been. There might be other factors, but predominantly that you haven't held that. You haven't practiced enough.
Yes.
In your off season, in your prep season coming in, because it's kind of like, okay, your body's already tapping out and you're 30.
Yep.
And it doesn't go on. You guys see all of that.
Oh yeah.
The shaking, the sweating, you know, all of that becomes very clear, doesn't it, when you're up on stage under those warm lights?
Yes. And as the divisions go on, you know, I often say it's about who fades first. You know, we compare you, and if it's that close, sometimes we just keep posing to see like who's going to lose it first. You know, who's going to, you know, not be able to show us the right physique, or, you know, we're looking for flaws. And so we will keep turning and posing you to make sure, like, you know, pose for pose, who is winning this pose, and, you know, who has the better overall aesthetic. It can take us a while. And if somebody starts to fade, even in a, say, a division like figure, say you're tired and you can't hit your legs anymore, you know, if all of a sudden your quads look totally smooth, that could impact you if it's that close. So
and that's another thing as well, knowing your body as well. When you're on stage, are you like, for me, I'm someone that does fade, you know, not like condition wise, like my body just flattens out, like the carbs leave the body and they're gone. So I have to put more fats into my body to kind of keep the carbs in and keep that pump. So that also is an important factor when it comes to being on stage. You're going, I need the stamina energetically. I need to make sure that I'm fueled properly. And you see this and you hear this as well. And like I said, I've only trainee judged just once, but you can see the ones that fade on stage. And even, you know, with myself, you know, the ones that have taken like too many diuretics or have, you know, depleted themselves and haven't loaded properly into that show. You get on stage and you see how that impacts the endurance and that stamina when they're up against all those other athletes.
Yep. I'd say less is more in regards to all that, but definitely knowing your body and knowing, you know, how everything's going to impact you without any, you know, question, you know, reducing that margin for error as much as possible is important.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got another question.
Yes, that was a good one.
That was really good, and such good points as well that you made out. I know anyone who watches this is going to get some, you know, great feedback from that. So we've got, how would you describe the difference between athletes and she's got looks in Europe competing in NPC worldwide and here in the US muscularity wise?
Well, it was always typically thought that internationally the athletes were more muscular. I don't necessarily find that to be true. I actually think that the international athletes tend to do better as far as conditioning. And I'm speaking of like, especially in bikini. I think that in the US, some of the amateur athletes push it too far, and we have issues that they're too hard, they're too lean. I don't tend to see that when I travel overseas. I just feel like they tend to nail their conditioning better, actually, than in the States. I'm not really sure why that is. If it's just like a different approach, but I know one thing that in the States, I think a problem for the athletes is they try to get photo ready, meaning they try to look like the stage photos that are out there. And I've always said, Sandy will always say it, everybody looks sharper in those photos. That is not what we actually see on stage for the most part. I saw some photos of Maureen posted, and I don't know if it was the editing or what it was, but those photos, she didn't look like that in person. She looked the criteria. And so you've got to be really careful what you look at and whose photos you look at. And certainly, hopefully it goes without saying that social media and looking at social media for kind of, getting your head right or thinking of a target as to what you need to prepare for is not the best idea. The best advice, I think, is to go to a show or maybe even watch like a live stream. You can kind of tell better through a live stream what the athletes actually look like and when they're moving around and in proportion to each other. I think that's something that we're constantly fighting in the US. And we're constantly battling that, you're coming in too conditioned. This is not what we want to see. So I think the international athletes do a better job.
Yeah, and I think that's and on that note as well, which is, it's really important to go to your workshops if you're having regional and and national big workshops, and even like the one that Sandy yourself just put on, the big women's NPC.
Yes.
So
yes.
Like, it's good to go to as many of them as you can, because you get to connect with people like yourself, and other judges and other pro athletes as well that can reinforce that, and can physically see you in person and go, right, okay, you're right on track, yep, not too much more, or yet you need to work a little bit more as well. It's hard when you get a video or you see a photo. You're only judging that, you're not judging the whole person.
Yes, exactly. And that's what a lot of spectators, I think that's where they think the judging was wrong, or they don't really get how the show went or why people were rewarded, because they only see those little snippets. They don't see the whole performance. They don't see it in totality.
Or they're seeing the photo shoot afterwards, where it's all edited, and then, as you were saying with Maureen, they're edited to look harder and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And even some of the athletes, if you look, like I noticed that there's a forum that I'm in on Facebook with a lot of athletes, and they had posted a photo of a bikini athlete like in training, and yes, she was pumped, she had shoulders, she had definition. And someone commented like, this looks like figure. It's like, well, maybe it does, but she doesn't compete that way. She comes in as conditioned as we want her to be. She doesn't come in looking like that. Like, everybody looks different in the gym. And sometimes for a bikini athlete to be the right proportions, maybe they need to get a little leaner, but they will come in, a little bit smoother and more about shape than coming in with striations or anything like that. Like, they know to correct that.
Yeah.
So I would caution against looking at these, bikini girls who are like shredded in their workouts and stuff, because that doesn't mean that's what you want to look like on stage. They don't even look like that on stage.
Yeah.
I love that, and I'm guilty as charged. So about last year, there was our newest pro. I think it was one of our newest pros over the last 12 months. Her name is Taylor. She's a wellness competitor, and there was one photo that was taken of her like maybe 4 weeks out of the show, and holy Mary, Mother and Joseph, like physique, right? There was veins everywhere, there was mass, there was like just all over her legs. It was like train. I was like, holy moly, that's wellness,
right?
I was like, oh my god, is she doing it? I was like, that's not wellness, But then when she got on stage, it was like, oh, damn, that's wellness, you know?
Yes,
So
exactly.
part of the journey and the photos of that people are posting on their social media, you're going to look different from one day,
Mhm.
from one week to the next. That's the bodybuilding journey, you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sure.
so true. How many times, you've gone into a show. I remember going and looking at all of the girls I would be competing against and thinking, oh my God, they're so much more conditioned, or they're better than me in this way, and then you get there on the day and everyone will bring a different package and look different to the photos that they've been posting online. So yeah, you can never use that as a yardstick, can you? Like, it's just
Right.
don't look at the photos.
Yes. Yeah.
Go to the shows, go to the workshops,
Yes.
and
In person
get
is
the
always better.
individual feedback.
Yeah,
And you also get an
exactly.
idea as to like the girls that you're standing up against as well. You're like, oh, you look so much bigger on stage. Like you said with Sid, she's not,
Yes.
you know, she presents big because, you know, she flares out and her lats go here and what have you. And all of a sudden you've got this proportion that, you know, and this illusion that she's been able to create, which is the art of posing, right? Professional flex.
Mhm.
But then when you see her side by side, you're like, oh, she doesn't
I
look.
think it's more reassuring to athletes, like, oh, she's not crazy big. She's
Yeah.
not crazy muscular. It is about her proportions and the illusion. I think that's more encouraging because, yes,
Oh,
you look at photos of all of you athletes, like by yourself on stage, you know, you could look at 5'1", you could look like you're 6 feet tall. You know, it's hard to tell until you get next to somebody.
yes, yeah, that's so true. And I am a tall girl, like, so I'm 5'10", and a bit.
Mhm.
And people are always like, when I put my stage photos up, because they kind of know that I am tall, oh, you must be so massive, you're huge. And then, I'll be in my clothing for work and they're like, oh, you're a bodybuilder? Really?
Right.
Like, so they're so shocked that I'm not bigger and not
Yep.
this sort of, I guess, stereotype that a lot of people have in their mind that female bodybuilders or females that lift weights are, so we're going to morph into these hulks overnight and just be
Exactly.
these massive.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's
So
criteria that we try to follow on each of the categories, and yeah, the girls are looking. I think the Olympia was really great this year. I loved the judging there. I thought it was fantastic.
yeah, it was definitely
Good.
my favorite one. Yeah.
Good. I felt confident with who we chose too. I think that there were so many great athletes, but yes, I think that the winners are definitely the epitome of their category and great examples.
And one of the things that who was it that was telling us? I think it might have been Boliana, because she does some judging too.
Mm-hmm.
The gap between like Sid and number 5, for example, is so
Small.
Yes, it is. Yes. That's why I say, like, you could really look at the top 5 in these divisions and they all are so close to the standard. You know, they are the criteria essentially. Those are the best ones to look at. Those are the best of all the winners. And it is
Yeah.
really it's so hard to decide sometimes with that many athletes that are so close to being the best.
It's great too, I think, because they're slightly all a little different. They're different from one another, aren't they? They're not all the same. There was a different sort of shape for each of those top 5, but they all did meet the criteria perfectly, but differently. So I think that's probably the hardest thing for people to get their mind around, that concept that, look, even though they might look different standing next to each other, they do meet the criteria in these ways, and that's why they're standing there in first, second, third, fourth, and fifth position.
Yes, exactly. Like I take bikini and I think, looking at those top 4 in that comparison, they all do have different proportions. Some have a little bit more of a dramatic, just hourglass shape to their waist, like Daraja, and compared to Ashley, it's a little bit different there, just genetically. But do they have full round glutes? that are the proper condition, not overly conditioned. Yes. Do they have shape to their shoulders? Do they have a tight waist? Do they have striations, overly separated, overly hard? No, they don't have any of that. So yes, they check all the boxes, and that just happens to be their unique presentation. And I wish people would get more like, I guess more like black and white with the criteria, saying like, okay, no striations, check. Like, not overly vascular, check. Like, do I have full round glutes? Yes, check. Like, you don't have to look like Maureen, and you don't have to have those same genetics. You just take what is your body and check all those boxes off, and you'll get on stage and have a good chance at being successful.
Oh, the best advice. That's just, I love that. We might have to sound grab that and put that up on a,
like, and just go repeat.
Yes,
repeat,
it's broadcast out there. Yes.
Important broadcast.
Yes, please do. Because after the Olympia, everyone was saying, oh, the criteria has changed. The criteria is different. It's like, no, it's always been the same. It's a new athlete that's won, but it's the same criteria. If you actually look at it objectively, it is the same. It's just on a different physique.
I love that, because you know, it just goes that those that are trying to maybe push the envelope just that little bit too much, you know, being competitive is part of the sport. It's like, well, it's not about pushing the envelope, it's about meeting the envelope.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. That's a good quote.
You answered this earlier, getting into our next question, I think right at the start of our conversation. And, you know, especially as an amateur leading into, the pro leagues, for example. And it was like, how important is hair, makeup, and presentation in scoring?
It's very important. So how we score is we just place everyone. There's not really a scoring system. So you're not scored differently for muscularity versus, like, say, your hair or something like that. You get one score. And so if there's 10 athletes in a category, we'll place first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So that's how it goes. Hair, makeup, and presentation. And of course, your posing is super important, because you could have a great physique, but if you can't show it, we can't reward you. Like, there are times when, say, in figure, somebody can't hit their back shot. If you can't pull your back out and actually show us your lats and things, we may know it's there, but until we see it, we can't reward it. So of course, presentation is super important, but also your overall look. I mean, we're all human, and it is a subjective sport, right? So if you look poised and polished and everything's pulled together up there, you're going to give the impression of a more complete package. And it is about, health and wellness, and especially for wellness, or for women, it's about having, healthy hair, and, good skin, the appearance of that. I know that some women will do, like, makeup to make their face look less drawn. You know how some women get a more drawn face and their cheeks get a little hollow. That's not really, doesn't always look as healthy on stage. So doing something like that can really help you. I think also for, like, our women's physique and bodybuilding, if they feel like they may look a little bit more masculine, sometimes they just do different things with their suits or with their colors of what they wear to make them look a little bit more feminine. It can totally change your first impression, and just give you that more polished look, and I think help you meet the criteria even more. So I mean, like I was saying, I never had the physique to really win at the beginning, but I did all the details right. And that helped me to at least get a look. And I probably always placed a few places higher than I should have, because at least, like, that was together. I did the best I could with what I had to work with. So I always suggest covering those bases.
Yeah. Well, the next question I think was already again answered earlier on, which was what got Becky into judging originally. So we kind of already spoke about that, but there was that transition where you took some time off and then got invited to, be a trainee judge.
And it was such a good decision. It's offered me so many opportunities to speak with women and try to, I guess just promote the integrity of our judging too. Like I always say, people think there's politics, and there's absolutely no time for politics. As you saw, if you sat to judge, it moves fast.
Oh,
And
you've got
there's,
3 seconds, 3 seconds, and you're like,
yes,
boom, you've got to have already your first call out. The moment
yes,
they step out on stage, and I'll be the first to say that I did not cultivate that.
yes.
Whatsoever. And like I had there was other once they were out, and I was like, oh, can they do that again? I remember saying to Brett, can you get them over here again? He goes, we don't have time for that. We're gonna go.
Right.
Going.
Right.
So that within itself is something that you've been able, it's a skill, and also you have to have an eye for it as well. And some of us, some of us don't. You have it.
Yeah. And I feel fortunate too that, I've been taught how to judge more efficiently and stuff too. And, if there's one thing I could convey to everyone, is that it really is a fair process. Especially, with us sending people out from the States too, because Tyler's done a really good job of cultivating a team that is in it for the right reasons too. Like, we have no skin in the game. I don't train anybody. I don't have anything in this sport other than just judging. And my fellow judges are the same way. We love this sport. We talk about it even after the show's done. We go to dinner afterwards and we keep talking about our decisions and stuff. Like, we all really care about it and care about the decision being right. And we want that to be the same, throughout the world. And I just wish more people knew that, and knew that, none of us get anything from it by being political or favoring anything. We're just here because we enjoy the sport, and that's it.
And this is the thing. Oh, it's all politics. That person's got the most amount of likes on their Instagrams and has 50,000 views on their videos. Has a sponsored their sponsored athlete, and their supplement company puts money into the show that they're performing in, or they're competing in, and therefore they're going to get automatic top 3 place. I heard this from an Australian athlete that had competed overseas. They go, you're not going to get anywhere overseas unless you have a sponsor from an Australian, like from an American, sponsor that is actually competing, that is putting money into that show. And I was like,
oh my goodness. And that's so silly.
And it's so like, I was like, no, like that can't be true. But then if you hear that, and you've got those voices,
for sure.
I'm like, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to get the
yes. That's why we want to do the podcast, so that we can actually connect women, in Australia to let's hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Let's hear it from the people themselves that actually run the shows, and the athletes that are competing in the shows, and the coaches that are training the athletes for the shows. Let's talk to those people and really spread awareness and educate, and just raise the sport up.
Oh
yeah, dispel those myths, because I can think of how frustrating or daunting that would seem to have to compete in a show where you think you've got to jump through all these hoops. And I mean, I can tell you, I don't even know, like, especially me traveling to countries I never go to, I don't know who trains with who. I don't know who anyone is. And I have no ties to the promotion of the show. And that's the same even if I'm in the States. And that's the same for all the judges. They don't, the promoters don't judge their own show. So really there's no connection, and there's definitely no benefit for the judge. Like, we don't get anything out of that. And the same thing with social media, that always makes me laugh, because like Steve Weinberger, like, he's never on social media. He rarely is on there. Sandy is not, they're not on there seeing stuff. So the likes and the positive stuff like goes very unnoticed by the judges. And honestly, why would we care about that anyway? It's not a popularity contest, so.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's not a popularity contest. No one's scratching no one's back. No one's giving a good word on who's going to be competing with anyone else. So whether, you've got, because sometimes you hear this, you're like, oh, my coach knows XYZ overseas, and they're going to put good word, so we get a look in and get first call out, or, and I'm like, none of that is is right.
Yeah.
You know,
No.
but it's not right.
Yeah.
And in fact, like we know some of the coaches, like I know some of the coaches, I know some of their athletes, and at times they're not super happy with me just because, maybe their athletes don't do well. The best ones understand why their athletes don't do well and what they need to do for them. But they know that like once we're in the show, it's all professional. There's nothing, nobody is biased for or against anyone. And that kind of goes both ways. Like there are some athletes who have been, unsportsmanlike and things like that. And nobody likes to hear about that. But, when they're on stage, it is a physique competition. And, you hope that people behave in a respectful manner. But if they don't, it's still a physique competition. And my feeling about that can't come into play. So it goes both ways.
I love that. As I mentioned earlier on, we're a little bit isolated here in Australia because we're literally an island. We have about 10 state shows each year. We have 2 pro qualifiers, so 2 opportunities to essentially get your pro card and what have you. And so there's a lot done within the sport in this country, but then we don't see as much overseas, and then we get daunted going overseas because like it's a whole different kettle of fish for the best of us. But and then we hear all this stuff, so it's like, well, let's go to your Sandys, let's go to your Beckys, let's go to your Steves, and let's hear it from them. We have yet to, like, I think this year was like the first year that we actually had, maybe it was Fabrizio and we had and who was it that was in the women's bikini, not Stefka, we had an Olympian.
Right, yes. I can't remember.
And a bikini, first to make it to the Olympia from
that's exciting. Yeah.
Like this, that was like history in the making. We've yet to have a figure competitor. I think maybe actually it was Tony's ex-wife, Amanda Doherty. I think she did the Arnold, but not the Olympia. So we haven't had a girl get up on stage, over in the and qualify for it. So for us, we have to actually travel over to do the pro shows in the States or in Europe or wherever that they're on. And sometimes that's not as easy for us to be able to do logistically.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a lot.
Knowing that what you're saying is that, hey, this is not political. We are not on social media. Like, we don't care about likes. We don't care about any of that. What we're doing is we're going up there, doing what we're really passionate about, doing what we're really good about. And whoever's there on the day, whether they're from Timbuktu, the Bermuda Triangle, or down under in Australia, if they're presenting the criteria and they're the best on the day, they're going to be rewarded for that.
Yep, that's absolutely true. Absolutely.
So we have time for one. We've got 2 more questions. So
sure.
The first one was with figure, and I think we've already answered this too. So is balance, symmetry, and muscularity scored the same?
Yes, I think it all has to play together because you do only get one score and one placing. It becomes difficult when everybody has maybe an issue or is missing something. So then you have to decide what is more important. I think, a beautiful symmetrical physique is always going to be eye-catching for the judges. You may need to be a little more conditioned. You may need to bring, a little more shape, but symmetry and balance is so important in that division. Conditioning is important, but being overly conditioned is a problem. Because usually we see people who are overly conditioned have lost muscle and they've lost fullness. They're flat. They've lost shape. So they don't have that anymore. So I'd say like going too far, it's hard to get rewarded for that unless there's just like everybody else is so far off. And even then, like we don't really like to reward a stringy physique, if that makes sense. Like where you just look like you have gone over the line. You're not healthy anymore. That's not what we would want to reward.
And that, as well for figure as well, because I think you see so many different types of condition. If out of all the categories, I think figures like,
yes,
it's like this end or this end, you've got the ones that are at the really conditioned end, and I'll be the first to say that I'm one of them. I have veins everywhere except for my legs, even on my back and what have you. And I try to play that down on the day, you know, like with my loading and all that sort of stuff. 'Cause that's just how I'm genetically put together. And then you've got other people who
On the opposite end of your scale.
I know, same. I kind of wish I had that problem, but
Yeah, me too. Although as my muscle has matured, I have gotten more veins, but I'm definitely I wish for a little more sometimes.
yeah, yes, same.
but someone like Rose has like one of the best figure shapes in this country that I've ever seen. One of the best, you know. We've got an upcoming girl. Her name's Amy. I'll have to send you a photo of her. Like her side profile, like she's just like something else. You know, sometimes you just get those wow factors, like when Sid came in, you're like, holy moly.
Yes.
Like, I look at her and I'm like, that's an amateur, you know.
Yes.
She's another one that reminds me a lot like you, Rose, in terms of your structure and how you put together. But when we're talking about conditioning as well, it's like you don't want to be down that end and you don't want to be at that end.
No, it's
irrespective.
Such a hard line to find, isn't it? Like just the perfect one for, and you've got to just do show after show sometimes just to work out, okay, what is my best look? Okay, we've tried to come in a bit harder and it flattened me out, or let's go in and we'll try to come in a little fuller and you know, maybe you've spilled a little bit, but you know, you've just got to keep trying until you get to what looks perfect for your, you know, your physique.
Yes, and actually that reminds me something my coach always said to me, because I had more shape and structure than muscle, but he always said, you know, if you have good shape, you can kind of be a little left or right of center and get away with it because you've got the shape there. Whereas if, you know, you've got, say, narrow shoulders or, you know, a wider waist or issues like that, you've got to pretty much nail everything because you've already got other deficiencies you're trying to overcome. But if you've got nice shape, you can err a little bit on either side and do like what you said, come into your shows and try to find your perfect peak. Like you're still going to do pretty well and get a look if you have that nice shape to you.
Yeah. And the last question, I feel like I could just keep going.
I know.
Such a wealth of knowledge, but we're also mindful, Beck, we've got Issa coming on as well in about 15 minutes. And yeah, so she's our first wellness girl that we've had on. So we're super excited. But this morning we got a message through one of our listeners, and it was, what are judges looking for in a T walk? How many poses, length of the walk, and mandatories?
Well, so we have stopped in the States, like the NPC came out and said no T walk. So when you walk to the back of the stage and walk forward, this doesn't apply to the pros. Pros, you know, have a lot more flexibility to do whatever they want to up there. But we said no T walks, don't walk to the back of the stage and then forward, partly because our shows are getting so big. It just extends the length of the presentation. And really, it doesn't do anything for us judges. It doesn't show us anything that we really need to see. And something that I've been saying over the last year and that we've all been saying is less is more. Don't show us too much. Show us only what we need to see. I would keep it to, you know, if it's bikini, it's front, back, front, and you're going to have some transitions in there, but that's pretty much it. Don't show us, you know, a million different front poses, or certainly don't try to walk as an amateur. Don't walk to the back. Typically, you're going to show us a weakness. The longer you're up there in that box, the more time we've had to pick you apart. And a lot of people have like one or two bad poses. Like, don't put anything in your routine that is not a good pose for you. Even if, you know, say figure, your best poses in your presentation, like, are only maybe 3 or 4. That's it. Just do that. Don't do anything else. Don't hit a pose because everybody else is doing it or somebody told you it had to be in there. That is not accurate. you know, we'll do the quarter turns for you in your comparisons, but don't show us too much. I think that's what people get really wound up in. It gets too complicated. And I've actually even seen some pros kind of cut their routines down a little bit. They had to at the Olympia because we had so many athletes, and some of them have kept that going and just realized, like, I think this is safer for me. Like, good, I might as well just do what I know I'm confident in, what makes me look my best, and just cut it at that. It's never going to hurt you, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you want to save your energy for the comparisons as well. You know, if you're using all your energy up and like you're one like myself that flattens out, like you
Yes,
don't do that when you're doing your individual routine. You want to kind of save some of that juice.
that's a great point. Yes, you have to consider, like, how are you going to look after you've been up there posing the whole entire time? That is another really great point.
Yeah. Becky, we're definitely going to get you back on this show.
I'd love to, for sure.
You know, I think of all the other things that we could be talking about, and I think one of the things that you said earlier on when we were off air was that you would love to judge in Australia, and my golly gosh, we would love to have you here.
You're amazing.
Judging.
I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to add that to my list. I'm going to see what I can do about that. I would love it.
Yay, that's great.
Love that. You know, I'll be doing like a little chicken dance down the street, and no doubt Tony Doherty would be absolutely stoked as well, and honored. But you know, and even like, you know, getting you down here and having, you know, we have some of the most incredible athletes.
Yeah,
so many unsung talents that haven't had the opportunity to hit the big leagues yet, or go overseas. So to be able to, you know, bring someone like yourself and Sandy, what have you, you know, to our country, and be able to compete on our own home turf, with the likes of you, no doubt, we'll be competing and you'll be judging us in the future. Would be one of the world's greatest honors. Like, honestly.
Yes, thank you so much.
Gem, Becky.
no, absolutely. I look forward to making it there at some point, and definitely to talking to you guys again. I'm happy to do it anytime.
That's amazing.
Aww.
Everyone, we will be dropping this podcast within the next 6 hours. So stay tuned. And if you have any direct questions for myself or Becky, feel free to inbox us. And for now, we're signing off. And Becky, again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Really
ladies. It was my pleasure.